Cool. Hello, everyone. Welcome back on our second episode where we will talk about beyond the crisis of privacy. Because we have seen a lot of privacy crises in the past, we have seen a lot of scams happening. So, today we'll talk about what next. We will also talk about some of the biggest hacks that has happened into Web2 and Web3 industry. And we will try to
hmm
understand how these hacks can be like we can save them not happening again. So we can talk about what else of the fixes can be. So we'll talk about it one by one. So we have Dr. Daryl with us. We have Leela with us. She will join in next 5-10 minutes. Till then, I will start with a small discussion about understanding the major concerns of Web 2 and Web 3 data privacy. So I will start with that, Dr. Daryl, and I would like to know a small first, like small. Like I want to give a small questions to him just to understand what is the major vulnerability that he see into Web 2 and Web 3 space that might
Mm.
cause data privacy hacks, and how we can and then we can talk about the preventions for the same. But let's first understand the vulnerabilities. So over to you, Daryl. Please help us understand what vulnerabilities we see as an in Web 2 and Web 3 space.
Well, the interesting part of this is we've talked about this, and we've actually discussed some of those interesting Web 2 and even Web 3 hacks over the last couple of years. And I thought initially starting revisiting with historic Web 2 breaches. And historic terms here is not 50, 60, 100 years or whatever it was in the past, even though there are kind of bank robberies and things like that, and all kinds of things. But historic breaches in our terms are, we've talked about this, and again, the Equifax hack, where we had 147 million records that were exposed, and that was an unpatched software vulnerability. So you have these again point of conflicts, point of areas, and then going back to that, all in the heady days of 2013, 2014, all those years ago, the Yahoo breach, is Yahoo still around, impacted over 3 billion accounts and effectively destroyed the company. And then fast forward, I guess, to modern day in 2025, we saw that massive Web 2 breach recently. The Unwritten team brought out this staggering 16 billion login credentials were leaked. And so there's historic context of these where major platforms have failed, in this instance, Google, Apple, and Facebook. And again, it kind of points into the fact of you get what you pay for in the end. It may well be cheap, but what's the price of failure? What's the price of a breach? In Yahoo's case, it literally cost them everything. It cost them the company, it cost them, they went from $1 billion to nothing, basically. And we've seen that happen with many companies,
Yeah.
many airlines, when things are breached. And so the Facebook attack, that was a source of what, 30 databases via info stealer that underscored this persistence. And it shows the risks of these centralized systems where, again, we've talked about this over the weeks, a single vulnerability can expose millions. And so these are where these cases are highlighted, where the fragility of those centralized systems are shown, where there's a single failure, it can lead to massive data leaks. And I guess we can talk about that into Web 3 as well, but it's
Yeah.
a single point of failure that causes all these issues.
Yeah, so just wanted to know, like you talked about a lot of things. I guess one of the major one thing that I really caught me, which was getting 500 million to zero, which is like happened to a lot of companies, and I have seen companies going from 100 to zero, and this has happened in Web 2 and Web 3 space both.
Mm-hmm.
Even so, some of the biggest hacks that happened. Even I've seen companies like, if you look at the FTX, Luna, these like if I have to name them, these are the biggest companies which got from million to zero. Even I know one company called Wajirex, they got hacked and then they are gone. So there are a lot of hacks that I've seen, and I guess these kind of concerns are very alarming when we talk
Mm-hmm.
about data privacy and security. So let's say if you have to point out two three major points which might lead to a hack, which will be those for you? Like two three points that you want to make sure, like that this might be one reason where data security or data privacy can be a one major concern of your data can be hacked. So like any two three pointers you want to make mention?
Well, I guess that we can talk about Web3 and we're hacking costs, many things. I mean, in that instance, that it was due to primary keys being leaked,
Hmm.
or smart contract flaws. The same thing applies really to the centralized systems. We have a whole host, and we've talked about this over the last couple of weeks, where there's vulnerabilities in the system, there's phreaking, there's war dialing on those systems, there's what I call the Misnik attack, which is people have gone in there and tried to use all kinds of security flaws, pretending to be people, going onto sites themselves dressed as people, and there's many different ways that a centralized system can be attacked, what we mean by a single point of failure is that at any moment within that database, within that system, it can be a point of asking for an admin password, having the wrong protocols, having human error. So there's a whole host of different types of systems that can be approached and breached, and so it's a complex issue when it
Yeah.
comes to that.
Cool. So just also want to understand, see, you come from a strong tech background, spent a lot of years in the industry, and might have seen up some of the bigger hacks in your life as well. So if you want to tell us any story that was like that you have heard that this is the major is hack that has happened, which you think if I would have a fix, I can not I can like I can fix this thing not to happen again. Like any story that you want to tell us.
Well, I guess the Iranian hack, ironically, had an impactful mark on Iranian systems. But we can talk about that Novatex breach in 2000, well, this year, and the impactful site of that, and could it have been prevented? And so when we look at things like how that was hacked and what $100 million was drained, um, yeah, there's some political will there, and in saying that, it created an internet blackout in Iran itself. The attackers, possibly state linked, um, exploited these vulnerabilities in leaking code, and it's classic. It's the same, what I call the Misnik attack, which is a classic way of knowing a system, knowing how those processes work. There's a point of failure, usually an individual that's either been coerced, or they've been, in some instances, when it comes to governmental side of things, or organized crime. Again, classic bank robbery, where the bank manager's wife and children are being held hostage, so he or she gives access to the vault. Same thing here. These are central exchanges where infrastructure's gone. Decentralized systems audit security protocols in real time, so that doesn't happen basically. And so decentralized systems can block those exploits. But the problem with that is that you have different types of impacts, and how they can be run. The Bybits 1.4 to 1.5 billion hack in North Korea exposed again Web2 exchange weaknesses. Do you want to sort of talk about that, where the Lazarus Group were exploiting that by cold wallet transfer flaws? There's a whole host of different types of exchange where you get
Yeah.
sophisticated state actors, and actually we kind of badmouth Iran and North Korea, but in the book that I wrote, when we were kind of looking at building LLMs and multimodal AI agents, some of those guys in Iran were writing some really impressive code. So I always call it a two-way street, in terms of, like, you have bad actors and you have really good actors. And so we have to kind of realize that some people are threatened and coerced into doing things that they don't want to do, and they want to be on the, as I said. So there's really an interesting aspect of what we call at Votra a two-way street, in terms of how things go.
Yep. So yeah, you talked about a lot of biggest scam that has happened recently, and even I guess when you were talking about these scams, I remember one of the scam that where I lost my own money. So I spent it like I traded Luna at back in 2023, 2024, I guess. So I was like heavy trader there, and then suddenly the whole ecosystem got crashed. I lost around lakhs of rupees there. So I guess I understand like how a millionaire can go from being a millionaire to a roadside guy. So it's like it can happen to anybody, and I have seen it. I've seen things happening. Even if you look at the FTX crash, which was the biggest scam that has happened. Then there is a DeFi. If you look at DeFi as an industry, there might be a
Yeah.
lot of potential scams that might happen, and there might be a potential fixes or solutions to those things that so that it should not happen again. We will also talk about those things, but
Mm.
I also want to understand one more thing that's I guess that's very much important. So when we talk about decentralized storage, okay, and when we talk about centralized storage systems, so there is one question that people really have is like the onboarding process. So if you look at if if I have to get onboarded on a Google Cloud, it will be easier to do. But when it comes to decentralized storage, it is a little bit difficult. So how you at Water is trying to fix that issue so that the onboarding should be an easy thing for people like us who don't even know Web3 or wallet creation or something like that. So how we can fix that as an issue?
It's a really good question because the thing what you I kind of think of it in terms of like going back to banking where you it's difficult to create the bank account initially, making sure that you're either a citizen of the bank, that your information, you use things like passports and things like that to gain access to the account. But once you have your bank account, you can do all kinds of things, and those usually take a long time, and it's kind of one of the dichotomies within a within and the thing that we wrestled with at Votra is to make it as simple as possible for the users to gain access to a decentralized platform so that they can literally run their systems in. uh, Again, it's not just a case of just storing your photographs or your documents. There's a whole host of things there. There's a marketplace, there's a NFT marketplace, there's a marketplace for a whole host of things. But to make it as
Mhm.
simple as possible, for you to share information, for you to actually gain access to that, to get enhanced access, to lower those costs and things like that. So that's where we're seeing this kind of uh, DeFi, this decentralized financing, as part of the platform, but equally this idea of trading and yeah, and sort of making it easy. And that's been the hard part of making the Votra application so simple, to such an extent that when you actually show the Votra application, um, which goes live in a few days' time, that people go like, so is my data actually in a decentralized format now? Because the way we've tried to create the application itself is it's within a couple of clicks to get your information on the platform, um, accessed and then uploaded and then shared. You can actually share that application and share the data with other people that you deem are okay. So we've tried to mirror and copy in some respects the centralized systems, but make it in a decentralized way. There's just no. The interesting part of it is there is no database at the back end of that, which kind of freaks some people out. And so one of the one of the parts of Votra is to showcase decentralization and how it works, but then to people that particularly in the banking industry, when they're doing to enable peer-to-peer lending and trading and bypassing and things like this, it kind of and lowering that risk persistence. We can kind of like do all these robust security checks in DeFi, and allowing this sort of Web3 storage and guiding this enterprises and decentralized systems and compliance and securities that they need. And again, we can do things to do with things like NFT access control, transparencies for things like well, anything really, but trust related data, zero trust in that kind of thing. So there's many areas of that we need to create a what we call a zero trust system. And what that means is that we can create a decentralized zero trust marketplace. And it's pretty cool, actually. It's really, it actually is kind of interesting. I hope we're going to talk about things like combating fraud and things like counterfeiting as well later, and maybe talk about NFTs, but and
Yeah.
strengthening healthcare. Hopefully, Leela's going to be on the line soon, where we can actually discuss some of those
Ye-
aspects.
Yep.
And so it'll be
Yeah.
pretty cool.
I'm here. I'm here.
Oh,
I've been here for a little bit.
great, cool. I thanks Daryl for letting us know, because it's very good to know that there is an app that is similar to centralized data storage and easy to do the same thing as we do on store data on Google Clouds. And if this is the case, I guess people will definitely gonna use it, because they also want their data to be safe, secure, and should be private to themselves, and they can own it, they can sell it, they can do anything they want to do. And if it is easy to do, I guess there will be mass adoption will definitely gonna happen. Cool. So I guess next question I have it for Leela, because she is here. So I also want to understand her perspective on data privacy and security. So Leela, I just want to know, as per you, what is data privacy and security look like? So if you come from a company and you are like storing a lot of data, in that case, what will be your first thing that you look at when you talk about data storage layers and when you talk about data privacy and data security?
You had sort of talked about it a little bit earlier. There's one thing to the efficacy of the program, like how it works and sort of the concierge ability to be able to look at that. I think when, like you were saying, if something is decentralized, but it looks centralized, there's a education piece of understanding the nodes and how that, how we're leveraging that information. And I'm speaking about this like in language, like I think I understand, but I'm like your end user. So if I understand it, then I trust the system. But you brought up a really important word, which is trust. So if we look at government policies globally, fintech has had huge success, and they have best practices that I think that have been very, very reasonable in solving solutions. Like if you look at JP Morgan and their billion-dollar industry in fintech and their ability to be able to move money around and all of those, I think it lays a very good pathway for the trust systems of understanding. But it's kind of like when credit cards first started coming out. How is this piece of plastic supposed to replace the dollars in my hand? Right? Do you remember? I'm old enough to remember when Sears had their first credit cards coming out, and people didn't understand that they actually had to pay back that money. I can bring it even to COVID, at times when we had programs where money was going out to the public during COVID to help combat with business, insolvencies, or if you weren't working and all of that. And people literally did not quite comprehend that they actually had to pay that money back. It wasn't dollars that were just being given to them. There seems to be a fundamental breakdown in understanding what that actually looks like, what it is, how you maintain that, and how you organize it. And so I think that when you look at like digital identity, I think that that's a portion of within the policy side. And you're asking me, Himanshu, about my space, like in terms of protection of data and the policy on that. I think that digital identity has a very difficult time with its definition. And I think, you know what I mean? Like we have to, I think for things to be immutable, to use that language, to be able to say that it is this thing, you have to have a very strong definition in your policy framework about what digital identity means. And if that's being transposed or translated as an NFT, okay, but we don't have policy on NFTs. We don't have, right? So that's where the conversation I think comes back to for me is how to the regular person do I explain within a policy framework about your digital identity, how that's going to be protected. So that would be my number one portion. And I think that's where Votra could actually be very, very possible. Or, these other things that we're looking at is that within the pull down framework of what it is, how is your digital identity being identified and what does that mean? So if we're using zero knowledge, for example, or zero trust, you were saying, there's a tremendous amount of vetting that has to go into that before you can have zero knowledge. That's like the ultimate, you are who you are, trustworthy. I mean, I don't know how don't know how most people who work in politics are going to pass that.
Yeah, it is one of those interesting things, and you bring up a really good point there, because in the UK, there's been a movement to have identity, and mainly recently, and politicians are like, they can jump on bandwagons to prove to get a particular thing put over the line, and a lot of the things that are done by stealth that people kind of will agree to that, but don't realize the implication of that. And that within the UK at this moment in time, there's we've had two interesting things that have happened in the last couple of weeks. One, where we had the assistant dying bill that's actually been passed by
Yes.
what you guys would call the lower house now, but our parliament basically, and then it goes to the House of Lords for agreement, and then it goes back to goes back to Parliament for voting, and then it becomes law.
Correct.
But the interesting thing is, I've been noting what's been happening in, I understand that I understand that situation very well when you consider people that have sort of life-ending conditions, and I'm sympathetic to those people. But equally, I'm, this world that we live in, this Web2, Web3. I mean, we can probably go through some of the case studies of skullduggery across the ages in terms of this, but. I think the reason why things like Web3 will dominate over Web2 in what I call the immediate time, and then into the future. Really, Web3 is a solution. We've talked about, we can talk about things like piracy and fraud, counterfeiting, but as you said, Leela, this idea of AI data protection and having a systematic impact on the whole future of AI content, individual freedoms, as we said in the last chat, this and I use provocative language here, emancipating people from a governmental population and a digital plantation. It's important. It's important you think in that terms of like, that kind of level, because once you have, and what I mean by this is simply put, this identification card, if that's linked to the Bank of England's trying to do digital currency now, and that gets linked to your digital identification card, suddenly the identification card becomes a controlling aspect of life. Step out of line, say the wrong thing, say a bad thing, and then boom, you no longer have access to money. You have no longer aspects to transport, medical care, and so on and so forth. And that's kind of being used to deal with things like asylum seekers at this moment in time, which is a blip in the history of where we are now. England's always been, and the United Kingdom's always been a group of countries that have welcomed refugees. It's been kind of exploited by a group of frankly scumbags around the world to get people on board and get people addicted, just like we've talked about people trafficking. This is kind of like one of those things where you get stuck in. So there's many areas of there where you can get access, and that's what I mean by this two-way street of understanding how things are going, and where blockchain is this, as you said, this immutable ledger that ensures this ability for records and verification of this through NFTs.
One of the things that we might want to consider, because if your NFT has your DNA, right, that is immutable. That is your one true art form of who you are. Right? And if we look at the perspective, like, for example, like if we go back to digital identity, for example, right now, throughout the UK, you're having concerns. Yeah. You're having concerns, exactly. You're having concern, like just look at data, or just look at laws around, for example, self-ID, self-identification. This has been a really, really major issue around people who are transforming their bodies into the body and the gender that is preferred to them, which I completely understand, agree with, and probably for 90% of it have understanding. However, who do we determine who's ready to self-ID? right? Is it a person that's done the transformation or a person who's having that feeling that day, right? And that I don't mean to in any way minimize the people that are going through these incredible transformations. And I certainly appreciate the work and the time and the energy and the mental space that goes into all of that. My concern always is for the nefarious use of people. And it's not the people who are transgender that I'm concerned about. This is the least of our worries. It's the predators who will take advantage of a piece of legislation that is actually meant for a group of people to give them agency over their lives, who they are, right? So if we're looking at agency for a group of people that deserve, require, and are needed to have safety and the capacity to be able to determine their future, which is the agency, this should be the agency of any human being. But how do we stop predatory behavior in that space for people who are looking for opportunities to use a piece of legislation that is actually intended for freedom and for the ability to exist, right? Which in the nature of things, the right to exist is why we do any of these things. And that's just a regular piece of legislation with a human standing in front of you defending that. If you look to, if that's one piece of it, right? But if you're looking at how we're going to identify an individual in the Web3 space, like if we're looking at deep fakes or impersonation scams, I mean, we can see that Web3 has the opportunity to really reduce that, right? So there was that one thing that was in the banking, that know your customer, right? Are you familiar with that, right? So the know your customer is kind of like what we're trying to attempt in the science side of things, where you know your DNA, but we're not compromising your privacy, right? So those are sort of some of the issues that come to mind. And then the other thing I was going to bring up that was sort of part of the Web3, I'm sorry if you've already spoken about this, I apologize for being late, but it was like the smart contracts, right? Because you have like pre-agreed conditions, kind of like how you were saying, the whole reason government is there is to actually create legislation to protect you from government. that's the whole point, right? Is that nobody's above the law, or shouldn't be, right? So how do we look at those smart contracts as potentially the answer to the question around pre-agreed conditions that could change? Like, say, for example, this is not the body I want to be in at this point in time, and I decided to do that transformation. My pre-agreed conditions would be on my female body. But what if I change my gender? What if I change my religion, right? What if I, decide to, suddenly, go into, a different faith or anything like that? Those human conditions, while they're pre-agreed upon, I think the evolution of a human being has to also do. So this is my question on smart contracts and the prevention of tampering. So sorry, I know we're covering a lot of ground here.
Yeah, I mean, I was saying to Manchu earlier that this is a very deep and involving conversation that we're having now, because we're kind of decimating both of these areas, and both in the past, in the present, and going into the future. And so there's lots of things and lots of things to the smart contract, I think, is something that is immutable. It is something that cannot be destroyed. And once it can't be destroyed and it can't be hacked, and it gives the user confidence in whatever that is. You talked about religion. There are some religions, if you switch from one particular religion to another, it's a capital offense, which means you could be beheaded, and so, or hung or shot. And so in my country that happened a few hundred years ago, but there are some other countries that still do it now, and it could be for the most. It brings into things like Canadian law, Indian law, British law, Swedish law, if you're into piracy. There's a whole host of areas where you're subject. We see it now with how people use to avoid tax. They'll have somewhere in Belize, or somewhere off the coast of England, or somewhere off in one of those small little areas in Europe where there's small tax. And I always think of Bernie Madoff when he was doing his Ponzi scheme. He said before he died, he did an article where he said he was amazed at how much money people would give him just to make an extra 2% on their stocks, and literally hand over their life to them just for an extra 2% a year. And I also thought that was bizarre, really. But you know, if you're making an extra couple of 100 million a year on a few billion, then you know that you could do stuff with that. You know, it might buy you your next yacht or something, or at least the anchor for one of them. So I'm always wary of that with the application as well, of how we actually utilize smart contracts and allow people the freedom to express themselves, to do things that they wouldn't naturally think is able to do. We've talked a bit about things, the good side of this, which I always think that we always talk about the nasty side of this.
There's
But
lots of
there's
good
only a
stuff.
small part of people
Yeah, yeah,
there's only a small part of people that are doing all the horrible things.
correct.
And the majority of things that we're talking about, you know, being able to travel around the world, being able to take my information, being able to take my data with me, so that if I go into a hospital that may not even speak my language, or they can have access to a system that allows me to see that. Biosport, BioArrow, doing all kinds of amazing things there. We're doing translation. There's all kinds of legal things that some of the Core Wealth partners are doing as well. So there's a whole host of things that we can do in a decentralized manner, and I think that's a cool part of this. I think you brought it up. You raised NFTs, and so one of the interesting areas we spoke about in Abu Dhabi was this idea of art and music and reducing piracy, and on a crude level. For instance, musicians can tie tracks to blockchain, so those smart contracts can be an MP3 file. It could be, you know, it could be that Sony Music have a you know, we see this on things like Pirates Bay, where people are downloading the latest whatever movie or book or software or whatever it is they want to download, they can download. But each one of those elements, each one of those MP3s, MP4s, or whatever it is, can be put as a contract, as an NFT, and then that can be then that can be then linked to that individual. So if that person allows that file to be, if it's stolen from them, again, the user can not do anything with that, because if that MP3 is used or downloaded, then it gets access, and we know where that is.
Yeah.
If it goes on. And that's a cool thing. And curbing counterfeiting, it's a 500 billion. I didn't realize that the counterfeiting is 500 billion. That's in the United States. We reckon it's about 1.2 trillion dollars a year in music and arts alone. Let alone when we look into things like credit card fraud. We're seeing it now with people that are being trafficked, and all kinds of things that's happened in the centralized systems, curbing all those things. And so suddenly it becomes an effort for us to do this.
And I was,
and again,
yeah, I was going to say, let's talk, because I think I think you came to the point that I was sort of looking for, is that the reason why we have to talk about it is because these are the questions that are being asked. They're very reasonable because people are concerned. It's new, right? But at the same time, it's always been like that. Every new thing that has come in, there's always been people who have been able to use it for nefarious reasons. But generally speaking, it has improved our lives and helped us to understand and be able to function within, you know, the way things are changing. I think probably one of the strongest aspects for doing what we're doing right now and talking about Web3, and some of the takeaways that I've had, is that things are moving so fast right now. We need a product and an opportunity that can evolve quickly, right? And so that would be probably my main reason for standing on this soapbox to suggest, right? And that, because decentralization has, there's things that when you remove intermediary encrypting ownership, right? Like when you enforce that kind of transparency, I think that will already build it would build that resistance to fraud, like to your point, I think already, like within the system. So, you know, maybe one of the things that we should talk about in, you know, future meetings is like kind of what are the policies that we would be looking at? Because my concern always is that the horse has already left the building. So we're going to have policymakers coming in, you know, trying to bring things backwards. I don't know if that will help, right? You know, it's kind of like, sorry to bring up something that's very controversial, but if you bring up the gun laws, for example, you have one side who is very, very passionate, and rightfully so, about the amount of children that are dying at the hands of horrible people with guns in schools and all this, and very reasonable concerns, but then they're going after gun owners that are good people that would never actually shoot somebody, right? As opposed to looking at the violence and the concerns and the crime and how the guns are getting into the hands of those people, and actually looking at, I would say, the fundamental issue. It's not gun ownership, it's criminals who have access to guns, right? So I mean, I'm going to get myself in a whole hill of beans of trouble for having this conversation, but I think that when you bring it down to that, in that piece, that the very, very, I think, personal and very relevant times, when you look at the opportunity to be able to say, if you're vetted and your information is zero knowledge and you have that, you're not, those kinds of things won't be taken away from you because you've already been vetted in that space. It's already immutable along the blockchain, who you are as a person and what the laws are, and that you stringently follow those. A person who is a honest gun owner knows all the laws. They know all the regulations. They understand that. They're not, they don't.
Yeah, I mean, in the early days of encryption, there used to be, and some of the listeners may know this. There's something called PGP encryption, a pretty good protection. And
Yeah.
at the time, there was lots of people they were worried about this sort of two authentications. It's kind of how the blockchain system works, where you have a public-private key kind of thing. And at the time, there was lots of, I remember in England, there was a big hoo-ha about, people accessing this. It almost impossible for the security service to hack these things and blah, blah, blah. And the simple thing was, somebody said was that if you outlaw PGP, it's only outlaws that will actually use it, and everybody else that wants to use it for good. And it's kind of the same thing here. It's the same analogy where when it comes to PGP, it's the same thing with blockchain. This idea of us to again, we could go back to AI and say how the Web3's role is securing AI, and as you know, I built lots of large language models, so I know a lot about LLMs and how they can be exploited, and so we can actually build that into the system so that we can protect people's ID into the future, and so that where these LLMs are pulling data from dirty data, as you like to say, from all locations, but there'll have to be a way of cleaning that data to make it fair, to make it accessible to people and reusable for people to use. And I think that's where this thing's happening. When we're seeing it now within many fields where LLMs and Grok and ChatGPT and AI systems that have been built for individuals, for companies to do all kinds of things, are pulling information from all disparate sources. That's a pretty damning thing for people that are in the arts and music that may have created some sort of let's steal Van Gogh's style, let's blag Picasso's style, or as you say, it might be somebody let's take in things from Martin Bormann or somebody. It could bring in all kinds of weird areas that you don't want to go down. But the thing with Botcha is, and I think the thing that I like to say to people is that we do that in real time. We create smart contracts and audit them, and do this anomaly detection in real time, so we can actually protect against exploits that we kind of saw in Web3 in 2025, and definitely for all those things. So I'm really interested to sort of see how we can actually. For me, it's going to be interesting to in future things to talk about things like how banks can use this, how healthcare can adopt this, and how Botcha's helping this to dominate basically. So that's kind of where I want to kind of go. Of course, I would do being the CEO of Botcha, but we could.
But that implementation is exactly what we need to talk about. Like, for example, I was going to ask you too, like, because you were talking about, because they have the options too, like, of the sort of peer review, right? Whereby that you have you have the organizations as well too, right? As part of that to sort of, I mean, that's a really great opportunity, because that's kind of like building a community that's decentralized, but allows you to like have collective decisions potentially over, you kind of, you sort of reduce that single point corruption opportunity, right? That's I think a really interesting part of what we're seeing, and I'll be interested to see as to you and the other groups of the communities and the organizations, because a lot of this will have to be interoperable, right?
Yeah.
Among the organizations already there. So how are you as organizations that are sort of leading all of these discussions, how are you, there's going to have to be a collective vetting as well too, I would think, right? Like within
that's what Dr. Kapoor and I first started talking about. We met at the Royal Society in London at a meeting, and let's have a chat after the meeting for 5 minutes, and it turned into a 3-hour a chat about life, the universe, and everything. And this is where we talked about this idea of Leela at Biosports, Patrick at Biosports, Dr. Raj at BioArrow, and all the other people in the network, and how they can actually interact with each other in a decentralized manner. How can we actually then share information? As I said, sharing. How do we actually allow individuals, and we can do that internally within the group of Kapoor Wealth of partners, and we can do that and showcase that. But it's then expanding that out to the wider universe and involving politics, involving the banking industry, investors as well. The investors that get involved in all our companies have a personal and a kind of really interesting aspect to where they want to talk about these things and see where they see that this is the issue now, but they also see where this is going and potentials for a long time into the future. We're talking like 50 to 100 years kind of into the future, kind of like scope in terms of where this is going. And it's that kind of level of things. We see that in the Gulf, where they have 25, 50 and 70-year plans, and in the West we don't kind of think in that way, but those guys do. And that's why Abu Dhabi and those areas and the UAE are sort of leading the way in terms of decentralization, because they get it basically. And so it's kind of fascinating. Even within London, we have a massive fintech and DeFi community that are kind of understanding where this is going. It's kind of fascinating. It's really cool.
Yeah, we lost Manchu.
Great. I guess there are a lot of conversation that has happened.
Yes, I'm sorry, Manchu. We just started.
He's letting us talk. He's letting us
Yeah, I get Dr. Baker and I on a call. I apologize. So we'll turn it back over to you for a second here. Apologies.
Yeah. No, I guess it was a great conversation. I guess we talked about a lot of points, digital identities. We talked about data privacy, security. There are a lot of things that we talked about. I guess one thing that caught my mind was a digital identity, because I guess it's one of the major concerns. So it was my story when I was when I joined my first company. The first thing that I was told, like, you should have a digital identity of yourself. So I started working on that part, and I started creating social media accounts, creating identity there. But the question is still the same: whether you create your digital identity or social media, is that yours or not? Because these social media companies can delete your account anytime. I guess that has happened to multiple people. So that's where digital domain system has came into picture. Digital identity has been created, and there are a lot of companies working on proof of humanity protocols where they give you all data on the chain, I guess, and that's one of the major
WhatsApp audio.
Yeah, so that was one of the major concerns that most of the Web3 people or industry is trying to tackle, so that we can give you a better future and the identity should be yours. So I just want to push further on the same question, and just want to know your thoughts on digital identity creations. So where do you see this as a future? Like, what's your opinion on creating the digital identity, and where do you see digital domain system, like the Web3 domains that has been created? How do you see these things will grow in coming days?
Interesting. You go first, Dr. Baker. I have a few thoughts.
Where's that bush you just threw me under? Oh,
well,
gosh.
I know that I have a lot to say, so you go first. I'll interject.
I think I've talked about this. I think this idea of future-proofing yourself, this idea of whether it's business or whether it's individuality. It's a two-way street, and they both can be exploited in very cruel ways, depending on where you are in the world and how it's being utilized. We've seen that with Iran, North Korea, and many other areas that are utilizing on a well, I'd argue a criminal level myself. There's equally some really impressive things that people like Ben Goetz and Charles Hodgkins are doing, where they're trying to utilize it. And I guess what we're doing at Botcha, we're trying to utilize this and move this space in a way that we can actually do good in the world. And so there's many areas that we can go down, and what we're doing at Botcha is we're trying to make it so that people, systems, and technology can work together and can't be exploited by bad actors
Yeah.
and bad groups of actors. And I think that's where I stand. That's my line in the sand that I will live and die by. The fact that my application and both on the mobile application and the desktop applications are used for good. I know that it will be used for bad, and as we've had internal chats about this, where I
I
pose to
guess.
my team, what's the worst you can do with our application? and
Yeah.
there's all kinds of evil that you can do with the application. But thankfully, that's only a small part of of people that will use the application. But that's the same for anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would
Definitely.
add, yeah, I would add to, so Manshiji and Dr. Baker, there's three things. I'll just bring it down to fundamentals of where I think that the merits of it, I think far outweigh the concerns. I think that, here's what I think. I think that if you're making fraud prevention, I think if you're making it more difficult to commit fraud, I think you're on the right track. And I think if you're including, cryptographic biometric data, and that helps that. And if it's immutable, then I think you've covered a lot of bases. It doesn't mean somebody's not going to be able to hack it, but at the very least, I mean, look at entire politicians and politics are taken down by Facebook and by the court of public opinion. So and misinformation, I might add. Yeah. My Facebook has been hacked several times, and particularly when I was running campaigns, and it was hacked with horrible things. So I've been personally. And do you think that anybody at Facebook would get back to me or give me back my identity? No, it doesn't belong to me. That's Alila here. The original one belongs to some other guy, and he's got all the pictures of my babies, me, and trips with my family. It's just crazy. So heaven only knows where those pictures are showing up. I think the second piece always in any sort of policy discussion, or here where we're having it, is privacy and consent. When you have that given to you and people understand and feel like they can trust that situation, I think it's like anything with DNA or anything, there's going to be at some point, there's a balance of privacy information and then sharing that information for the betterment of the world, to your point. I think that selective disclosure is a major issue. And so if you know that your information is not going to be shared, that information will be better, right? Just generally speaking. I think that one of the points that we need to talk about that is very important is inclusion and access, right? There's a lot of marginalized communities. Only 1 billion people in the world access healthcare out of 8 billion people. I can't even imagine how small that is when it comes to access of data. There's an entire populations of people that could easily be used because they're unidentified, or they don't have access to voting or healthcare or anything. There's no record of them. Yeah. Right? The opportunity to actually create an identity for a person that technically doesn't exist in the world, I think has a huge opportunity to close the gap for people who don't necessarily have physical IDs. And that could be anybody who's, unhoused, to a refugee, to marginalized populations, to tribal and indigenous communities that may have concerns with colonial, methodologies. I think that, giving that self-determination and agency over those data, I think those are highly merited pieces that really give reasons for what Botcha is doing, for why our protection of the data. Why? I mean, we're doing all of this stuff in, you know, sports and DNA and identification and AI. But at the same time, the company is building all of these protective models to be able to protect that data, because we know and we can foresee what could happen if that data leaks or if there's a breach, right? So
Yeah.
I don't know. I think if we're managing all of those pieces, we've got good people heading them up that are willing to answer the difficult questions. If they're willing, there's an entire philosophical, you know, discussion behind all of this, right? So
Yeah.
that's my three pillars and 3 points of what I would stand on to my soapbox on why this is important and why I think it's more valuable than it's a problem.
One of the
Yeah.
interesting questions I asked my daughter, I said to her, because she's getting to AI now. I'm kind of a proud father when she said that. I was like, oh, yeah. Anyway, yeah. Anyway, I said to her, how many people are on the planet? And she said, do you know what she said to me? She said about 900 billion, and I was like, what? Yeah, see, he's done it as well. And she said to me, she said, well, there are about just under 8 billion people on the planet now, but in AI terms, there's about 800 to 900 billion people on the planet in AI terms. So there's nearly a trillion people that have an AI identity. And I was thinking to myself, if anybody's read Caves of Steel by Isaac Asimov, or the robot series, Elijah Bailey and R. Daniel are my two favorite characters in sci-fi history. R. Daniel is my favorite character. But anyway, that's another story completely that we can go down, another rabbit hole. But they have basically back in the 50s when Asimov wrote that, he effectively put it into the future that people are basically on these planets, and each planet has a group of individuals, and each person has about 10,000 robots. And so he saw it as robots that are going to be kind of sort of looking after people. And I thought that it's kind of interesting, and I actually quote it as one of my book chapters. I used to use bits of the quotes from some of that from Caves of Steel. But I saw that as like AI now. AI will have, we'll have 10,000 AIs that are looking after us. That effectively 10,000 versions of Daryl, 10,000 versions of Leela, that are basically doing these various roles. There may be one of those AI versions that's a great engineer that's learned through an area that I go into. And who sells that? Who owns that? How? And that's where we're talking about owning your AI future, owning your decentralized future, because the only way you can do that, the only way you can take control of your future, which may be beyond your own life, which I think it will be. I talked to my mother about, we had Christmas here, actually, behind me. A whole group of people sat behind that table at Christmas. There was about 10 or so people behind me. And I said to her, in about 150 years, we'll still on that. There'll still be a table of us. We'll still be talking. And my mum went, "What do you mean by that?" I said, "Well, all it's going to be is that there's going to be a large language model of Daryl. There's going to be a large language model of Leela, Amanchu, and it's going to learn from what we've done throughout our lives. This podcast will be one of these things that it will learn from. It will learn my voice, learn my mannerisms, all these kind of weird things I'm doing with my hands, who I am." Maybe taking some of the things that we're doing and who we are as individuals, and that we be brought into this kind of like composite that we can get to existential things about living forever, and the AI of Daryl will live forever even though I'm gone, basically. That's kind of a really interesting concept that we can kind of talk about in terms of tinfoil hat brigades, but the whole point of that is that owning that AI future is where we're going with this. It's this idea of owning myself, owning this image, this thing that's in my head that creates all these crazy thoughts and these are crazy ideas, and monetizing that, not just for this carbon based unit here, but into the digital aspect of my life and where it's going to go.
Yeah.
And that falls into some of those things that you've been talking about, Lee, about real time. This idea of self-determination and self-understanding and inclusion and exclusivity for individuals and for them being themselves, whether they're trans, whether they're not, whether they're, there could be a trans version of Daryl somewhere on the planet. And I'm not, it's not my kind of thing to be part of, but it could well be that somebody exploits my AI in some way that makes me into something that I'm not, and I may grant them access. And so,
Yeah.
how do I? And that's what we mean by this marketplace and accessing that information.
Well, the marketplace, what would be interesting about that is that if we're looking at sales, if we're just looking just generally at like how you market something like this, if there's an AI version of us that has a better understanding of the community that we don't, right? It's not because we don't want to be part of that community, we don't want to understand it. It just might not be in your network. So if your 10,000 Daryls are able to manifest, a Daryl that is from India and a Daryl that is in a different body, or a Daryl that is a child, or a Daryl that is a Leela, like if we're comparing nuts and bolts, as it were here, like those kinds of idiosyncrasies and the little tiny things are the conversations that have happened with philosophers since the beginning of time, because you were talking like where your book talks about human versus robot tension, but now we have human versus AI tension, right?
Yeah.
And is it actually freedom that we seek, or are we looking for those steel caves? Are we looking for parameters that actually enclose us into the bubbles where we're comfortable? And on any given day, that answer will be different, right?
Yeah. It's one of those many kind of situations that we kind of think about, but we have to think in terms of the way Votra's going, and what we want to think about is this idea of allowing people to do these things unaided, or in under their own control, or under their own
It's the control.
system.
Yes.
And that's the thing that worries me the most, in the sense of what we've seen in the past. Even in the past 100 years, we've seen some heinous things done because people are not liked, or there's a group of individuals that have a certain religion, or there's a certain group of individuals that have a certain way of life that you don't like. I'm from England, so we've had a couple of 100 years of exploiting of people, but we kind of learn from our mistakes, and we try to fix the world, or fix the world, but we've given a lot as well, and you could argue that we pulled things from all over the world to create the Industrial Revolution. I think that's the same thing with AI. I like your analogy of a Leela Darrell and then a Manchu, and there's a composite AI that we kind of bring in together. Or we're asking I think Elon talked about his team, how they use AI in the sense of they actually do effectively a rudimentary LLMs of themselves, where they can actually pull out, and it's learning from themselves, and it's making those decisions based on those individuals. Don't think Bill Gates is doing anything like that, or Zuckerberg, but there's individuals that are kind of looking at their own little niche that they're kind of trying to own. And I think we're kind of pushing those boundaries in terms of AI security, basically personal, but equally on a larger scale too.
Yep. Very, very interesting.
Yeah, so lots of things to talk about in the weeks and months to go.
Gonna solve the world's problems, right, Manchuji?
Yeah, cool. I guess we talked a lot of things, and now we are close to our end of this season, because
Wow.
we have if we keep on talking, we have a lot of more things, and this can go on to next 1 hour, 2 hours, and we can keep on talking. I guess, yes,
We're not Joe Rogan yet, but yeah.
We have to take a hard pause here, and then we can come again next week. We'll talk more about it. So before we close this session, I guess we talked about one good thing, that is AI, the integration of AI with the real world. And I guess there is a lot of companies which are looking toward AI plus data storage together, and then trying to manage their data in a more efficient way. So that will be my last question for both of you, just to understand from your perspective how you think that AI is gonna be very helpful for data management side, and what will be the concerns that might arise with AI and data storage together. So it's like one good part, one bad part. pros and cons?
I think it allows us to integrate lots of things together in a very secure and so it means that the decisions that we make should be a lot quicker. I talk about turnaround times for things like patient decision making, because when it comes to getting things to the patient, getting answers to questions, the sooner we get those answers and the cleaner and the better those decisions are made, then the better it is, whether it's a patient, whether it's a banking report, whether it's some DeFi stuff. And that in itself helps reduce costs, time, money, which means the infrastructure costs are less, which means we've got more money to spend on other things. And we're not wasting bureaucracy, we're not wasting time. It's very clean. And it's immutable, and you can't hack it if you try to it. There's a effectively an audit trail to you, so you'll be an idiot to do that. And so that's kind of my thing. That it's a way of reducing turnaround times in a secure manner, which reduces costs, which means that money can be used elsewhere. That's about it, really.
And what's your bad thing, Dr. Baker?
Well, it can be used to control people. Well, no, the actual system itself, because it means that it's decentralized. It means it can be abused as well. It means that I'm searching for a particular bit of patient information, a bit of patient data. I could equally be looking for some ungodly thing. If I was a trafficker, I could be using it to find out somebody, and it's very difficult for the security service to actually find out this particular information because it's decentralized. It means it's really hard to hack. It goes back to the PGP thing, where the security services are panicking about people sending information around the world because they can't break it, they can't decrypt it. And so that's the problem we have, the fact that it's almost impossible to hack outside of quantum computing, which is years away, basically. And I think, if you know anything about the 8-qubit thing at this moment in time, it's a long time away. And so that's the only problem there. The only problem is that we have an application that can be used, but it can be used for good, but it can be used for bad. And one thing we do at Voxtra is that our team, literally on every Monday, we talk about these things: the good, what I call the good, the bad, and the very ugly. And notice that the good is one aspect of it, but the bad and the very ugly are the two other aspects that we consider. So we know that 90% or the majority of people that use our application are doing it for the good, but we're equally looking for those nasty people as well.
And I think that if I was to go, I think that for me, agency is everything. And when you provide more agency for a person, you're also opening yourself up to having that, unless you're keeping it inside and you're not talking to anybody. It's like hiding money under your mattress, right? It's fine until somebody breaks into your house and finds the money in your mattress, right? Even though you think a bank is stealing from you and using your money. So I think that the opportunity, I would probably label it more as not good and bad for me. I think the opportunity is that the world is going to have agency and access, which requires education and on all of our parts, understanding what that means. On the flip side, I think that the security and ethics and governance that will come from that can also be used in order to release sensitive data in the wrong hands. We cannot judge another country's or person's morality. This is a philosophical discussion that we can get in that will never end. I think what has to happen is that from country to country, from organization to organization, the questions that any user, me being the end user, needs to ask is the questions on your security, your ethics, and your governance. I think that should be part of the zero-sum knowledge that you have of a person, of the questions that they're actually asking of this format, and that you bring people on and give access to the people who are asking the right questions. I think your prompting and all of those kinds of things need to be taken into consideration. And like you're saying, as they're learning about us on methodologies like this, A good AI potentially will be able to judge from my behavior whether or not I'm authentic or not, whether or not I'm telling the truth, right? Whether or
Yeah.
not what I'm saying, like I believe that those things, they'll be able to measure your sweat, your facial expressions, your authenticity, your understanding of something. I mean, I sit with my heater on all the time, so I'm always like on the glowy side. You know me, I'm always so cold. But those kinds of things, like those measurements, there are people in the world that are paid right now to watch a person's face, to see whether they look left or right or up or down, or if they do something with their face that is a tell. People who play
Yeah.
poker, like AI is going to have to be really good at poker and understanding, like if you teach it how to play poker and you teach it how to play bridge, right? It's going to have, one is going to be able to tell personality and one is going to be able to understand strategy. But that
But
collective understanding, I think, will be a huge part of how it works for people in the future.
the one interesting thing about AI is the AI just lost I think ChatGPT just lost a chess match to an Atari 2600, which I believe was released in
You guys?
1979.
Yes.
Yeah, so it actually lost to that. So uh, um, my grandfather, you said this saying that I won't quote him exactly, but BS baffles brains, but he didn't say BS, he said something else. But BS baffles brains, and it always does, because you're always subject to BS from a lot of people. But the interesting part of where we're going in this world is that we can call people on that, and we can actually bring actual evidence into this system, and you can't hide, and that's kind of a negative thing as well as a positive thing. um, but you can actually control who access that thing, and I think that's the important part here, is as we said, controlling your AI future. Amanchu, what do you reckon, sir? Because I know we've been rabbiting on a few for over an hour now, but dear brother, let me hear your views on this.
Yeah, so one thing that what I believe, like so I use a lot of data storage,
Mm,
and the one problem that I face is like data storage getting filled very quickly, and I don't even know what data to keep, what data to delete. I guess that's where AI is going to play a crucial role to let me know what kind of data I should store and what
mm,
kind of data I can delete. So that is when like data optimization can be done better with the help of AI. Even AI can help me. So even I guess Google Cloud has recently released Google Cloud plus AI combo, which they
mm,
charge at a premium rate because that AI give you more leverage. So I guess those AI integration can also help me understand based on my data storage or based on my interaction within the data storage layers, like what kind of searches I do, what kind of data I should store, how to store, what not to store, and
mm.
even how can I optimize my file so that I can have a lower version of the same thing without decreasing the quality of the image by uploading it on the storage layers. I guess there are a lot of
Yep.
things that AI can easily do. Now the bad part might be like I can be cons to it, which is like if AI getting self-learned so much that even take asking me, it keeps start doing things by its own, like
Yes.
even I don't know how much it is being shared, from whom it is being shared, how AI is being uh, doing things. Like even I guess there is one feature that Google has where it, based on your past image, it creates a video out of it and then it showcases to you. So even if AI has their they can misuse those images and can reshare to somewhere else. So I guess there's one problem that is with the AI is a self learning. Once AI becomes smarter and self learned, it can cause a potential crisis. But overall, it's a best boon to the current era. And I guess it's definitely gonna have their limitations, and developers are definitely gonna do something better so that there should not be any kind of mischief thing happening within the AI plus blockchain. But overall, the future is bright, and I guess we at Voltra is also trying to do the same thing so that you have your a better future and your data should be secure, safe. And with this note, we would like to conclude our today's space. And one thing which I want to say, like, stop using centralized storage where your data is not safe. Better you store your data where you can own your cloud. So check out Watra. We are trying to build a better and safe, secure future for you. And if you have any doubt, please reach out to us over the mail support@watra.com. We will be more than happy to help you. Our product is gonna live by next week. That is where we are aiming at, and we will also do a demo of the product when we launch, so that everyone can access the application, and we can also help you understand how to use the product so that it will be easy to use for you. And any ending thought from you, Daryl, before I close?
No, the only final thing is that we are looking at the ambassador program for youngsters. So we've talked about how AI is, and you know my story about my son when he first stood up. He walked up to the TV and started smacking it, and I thought, what the hell's going off here? And then I realized he was actually trying to swipe the TV, not punch the TV as it looked like from a distance, and it kind of made me laugh. And then it kind of made me laugh and go, oh, I'm old. This is the digital generation. We're going to.
That's my favorite story ever.
Yeah. So I mean, Mr. Biomatician here. You know, I'm ahead of the game, and suddenly my son makes me old in an instant. I'd love to know if anybody else has had that experience.
With my husband's computer the other day.
But the interesting part of that is that we'll be speaking to a guy called Donald and Joel, who I met in Calgary, who are a bunch of teenagers who are talking about nanobots and nanomedicine and some of the things that they're doing in terms of AI and how they're using LLMs and actually doing stuff at now. And Joel, bless him, he was I think 11 or 12 when he wrote his first program. And so we're going to get those on stream, and we're going to have a chat with them. So it's going to be really fascinating in terms of getting the next generation, the AI generation, on stream and having those guys chat. And they're going to be part of Isha's ambassador program. So that's to come. So anybody that's interested in sort of joining the ambassador program, which is for the youngsters basically, not as old fogies, please. Contact support@watra.com, and we're happy to get you on that stream.
There's another young lady who's working on, she's like 14 and a half or 15, and she's looking at phages. That's what her little study's on right now. I'll get her to you as well too.
Yeah, and the interesting part of that is we've got people from all over the globe, and so the hard part's going to be trying to find the time in our schedule. in the globe well, not the schedule, but what I think somebody's going to have to bite the bullet in terms of waking up quite early. It's easy as guys, but Calgary is a few hours behind, and so we'll have to work out a time zone that gets everybody up. But it's going to be kind of interesting to see some people going to bed and some people waking up and some people bright and early. So yeah, it's going to be cool.
Awesome.
Great.
Thank you, Manchu.
Thank you. I guess it was a quick alpha for everybody. If you are still early, be the part of the ambassador program. Do reach out to me or Daryl, or directly reach out support mail. We will be more than happy to share the program guidelines, how it will work, what tasks you have to do, and let's go. Thank you. Bye-bye.